What's up? My name is Eric Butler. This channel is called Report and Opine. I am back, and it wasn't long ago I made a video asking what happened to San Francisco, why has it become an unbearable hellscape, and quite obviously, I do not have a concrete answer to that question, but you should go ahead and watch that video. However, I do have a theory that maybe, just maybe, some of the political leadership, if you can call it that, might be at least partly to blame, and most of the politicians I want to talk about are not well liked outside of the mainstream media because, if you think about it, the far right-wing bigots would probably say these people are insane communists, while the most woke, delusional left-wing radicals would probably say they just need to move a little bit further left to create the imaginary utopia they so desperately long for. So, starting here with former Governor Gray Davis, who was in office before the media completely lost its mind, and I think they may have actually reported the truth from time to time. And for the record, I do believe there was a time when guys like Chuck Todd and Don Lemon weren't completely insane partisan hacks, but that's a different story. And this also might explain why he was actually recalled as the governor of California, because the media was reporting on a budget crisis and an energy crisis and general dissatisfaction with his, quote, leadership. So all the way back in 2000 and 2001, during his tenure, the state experienced an energy crisis characterized by rolling blackouts and skyrocketing electricity prices. The crisis was apparently caused by market manipulation by the energy companies, but Davis was criticized for his handling of the situation and perceived lack of proactive measures to prevent and or mitigate the crisis. Now, some might say he helped manufacture the crisis for profit, but that, of course, is unproven, and I can't really say. It was a little bit before my time, but clearly nothing is off the table at this point. During his time in office, the state also faced a severe budget deficit, and a lot of people held him responsible for the economic downturn. They criticized his management of the state's finances, the deficit, which led to cuts in public services, including education and healthcare, further fueled dissatisfaction, so it was a pretty vicious cycle for him. Then he implemented a substantial increase in the vehicle licensing fees, or the car tax, to address the budget deficit, but the increase did not sit well with most Californians, and it became a rallying cry for those supporting his recall. So overall, Californians just didn't like him. Many described him as aloof and lacking charisma, or Riz, as the kids might say today. And he was the first governor in California history to be recalled from office. Of course, he was replaced by the governor in 2003, who was probably the last Republican governor the state will ever see, because these people will not simply let themselves be voted out of office. But again, that's a different story for another time. Then there's Leland Yee, a former state senator who served from 2006 to 2014 and represented the 8th Senate District, which encompasses parts of San Francisco and San Mateo counties. He was most known for blaming video games for violence and constantly harping on gun control, which makes perfect sense when you realize he was arrested for running guns and was tied to a Chinatown gangster named Shrimp Boy Chow. It seems like they really wanted to corner the black market of firearms. So in 2014, he was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiring to illegally import firearms. In 2015, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of racketeering as part of a plea deal. He also admitted to accepting campaign contributions in exchange for political favors. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. His co-defendant, Shrimp Boy Chow, was also arrested as part of the FBI operation called Gilded Cage, which focused on corruption, money laundering, and general illegal activities associated with organized crime in San Francisco's Chinatown. So Chow and Yee were among, several people arrested as a result of the operation. Then there's San Francisco Mayor London Breed, who agreed to pay fines of nearly $30,000 for multiple ethics violations, including asking the former governor, Jerry Brown, to pardon her brother, who was locked up on manslaughter charges after a robbery gone wrong, which of course is also a different story. She also accepted unreported donations for her float in a pride parade and allowed the former public works director, Mohammed Nuru, to cover her car repair expenses of nearly $6,000, even though she's the highest paid mayor in the entire country. So she got off with less than a slap on the wrist because the $23,000 fine is just a drop in the bucket for her, even though she claimed to need help paying for $6,000 worth of car repairs. So none of it makes sense, but this is what we get dealing with these people. Mohammed Nuru, however, was charged with fraud in a broader federal corruption investigation involving City Hall. Nuru, as the director of San Francisco Public Works, was tasked with maintaining and improving the city's infrastructure, including streets, parks, and public facilities, so no wonder it's all falling apart. In early 2020, he was involved in a scandal that led to his resignation from the position. He was charged with multiple corruption-related offenses, including bribery, fraud, and accepting gifts in exchange for preferential treatment, which is not that bad when you consider Senator Scott Wiener, the creepiest man in all of American politics. He's done many terrible things, but notably he authored a bill called SB 145 that greasy Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law in September 2020. They claim the bill aims to lower the penalties for relations between adults and minors as long as the age difference between the offender and the victim is within 10 years. So I'm not going to get into all the specifics of the bill because it is incredibly hard to decipher with all the fake news going to bat for Wiener and saying things like Q followers come for Wiener because of homo-transformer phobia or whatever. Naturally, Wiener says it's just to protect the LGBTQIA plus community, and his entire life centers around being gay, because if not, he immediately becomes the enemy, just a regular white dude. And I'm not quite sure how Biden and Newsom have not yet been targeted by the mob, but that too is a different story. Anyway, critics of the bill argue that it provides offenders with an opportunity to evade mandatory registration, which I believe was exactly the point. Wiener also came up with the bright idea of paying junkies to stay sober. They called it contingency management, which involved providing small incentives or payments for every negative drug test over a certain period of time. Needless to say, it did not work. It's all just so annoying. Wiener is also constantly harping on drag queens, transing the kids, and not just Rona shots, but also HIV drugs. He's very clearly in bed, no pun intended, with the big far mafia, as I like to call them. So yeah, it just never ends with this guy. We could go on for days or weeks or months. In fact, he is completely awful, but we'll leave it there. Moving on. Katie Hill. She was a member of the House of Representatives in California's 25th congressional district from January 2019 to November 2019. She was one of the first openly bisexual members of Congress, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out why that matters, except to say, once again, white people need a victim card so as not to become the people they hate, which is most likely other white people, but whatever. Hill was a member of Congress for less than a year because some photos of her nude smoking a bong surfaced on a wife-swapping subreddit, leading to allegations of an inappropriate relationship with a campaign staffer, which she basically admitted to, and then people started calling it a throuple. Then there's greasy Governor Gavin Newsom, the American psycho himself. Hide your wives, all right? Most recently, in June 2023, he introduced a proposal to amend the Constitution to limit gun ownership by saying things like common sense gun law, which is very strange because not only does he have armed security all over the place, but he doesn't use that very same quote-unquote common sense when he's talking about things like transing the kids. He also wants to prohibit civilian acquisition of quote-unquote assault weapons. Notably, they will never define the term assault weapon because it is just made-up jargon used to scare people into submission. In November 2020, there was the French laundry scandal, which I don't believe we really have to rehash, but he was at a birthday party with some lobbyist buddies of his at one of the country's premier restaurants in Napa Valley because, quite simply, rules are for poor people. Before that, in April 2020, he made the decision to spend nearly $1 billion in taxpayer funds to purchase masks from Chinese company BYD, which raised plenty of concerns about transparency because after he announced the deal, very few details were disclosed, and his office naturally declined a request for comment. He later defended the agreement, claiming that the masks would be distributed to healthcare workers and emergency workers all over the state. Then all the way back, we'll get in the time machine here, 2007, he had a sexual relationship with the wife of his former campaign manager. He apologized during a very short news conference at City Hall. He called it a lapse of judgment and, of course, blamed it on the alcohol. A few years later, he claimed that alcohol was no longer a problem for him, which I suppose makes sense because he owns at least one winery that just happens to be a client of the now defunct Silicon Valley Bank. Then we've got Nasty Nancy, the Crypt Keeper Pelosi, who has probably never insider traded a day in her life. She has probably never gotten her hair done at a salon while screaming to the public about Rona and masks and staying at home. She has also probably never, as an 80-year-old woman, made a speech about how important it is for boys to use the girls' bathroom. I also doubt she ever tore up the State of the Union address because Orange Man bad, and she is certainly not a part of the systemic and or structural issues that the media and leftist zombie bots are constantly going on about. Then there's Adam Schiff. For years, he literally claimed he had proof of Trump-Russia collusion, but the lie detector test determined that was a lie. And that was probably just the most notable thing he's done. I doubt it was the worst, because odds are he's done something much more sinister, which is probably why he spends all of his time and energy chasing around Donald Trump like Wile E. Coyote does the Roadrunner. Eric Swalwell, not much to say. He slept with a Chinese spy and farted on live TV. Mad Maxine Waters, James Brown doppelganger who literally stood on a soapbox and told people to scream at anybody who may have voted for Trump if you see them at a restaurant or a gasoline station. Kamalto Hills Up Harris, queen of political platitudes and Costco-sized word salad. She lied about smoking weed. She kept prisoners beyond their sentences. She called Joe Biden a racist, which is true, so that's probably the best thing she's ever done. She was also, in her younger years, part of a Montel Williams harem, which I believe was before she launched her political career by servicing ex-San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. There's also former Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, who I guess by comparison isn't that bad. She's most known for tipping off illegal aliens when ICE was in town, which is strange because now they're getting illegals shipped to them and they want to file kidnapping charges against another governor, but whatever. She also oversaw one of the wildest Oakland Police Department sex scandals, which was not her fault, but she probably could have handled it a little better. And there's also articles written about her from a hard left perspective, claiming she will go down as the worst mayor in Oakland history because it will never be enough for these weirdos chasing that utopia dragon. And I can already see that the current Oakland mayor is in fact worse than Libby Schaaf, so more on her later. Lastly, Jerry Brown, who is not the worst of the bunch. He somehow managed to get elected as governor on 2 separate occasions, 28 years apart. He allegedly had some phone calls of some media reporters taped without their knowledge, and even as one of the earlier Sun Monster hoax purveyors, he used state employees to survey his private estate for oil development. And as we know, this is just a short list of awful California politicians, and each of them, I can almost be certain, has done plenty more awful things than what I've been able to mention here. So let me know in the comments, what other awful things are these awful people doing in California? Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe.